Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today I am going to show you a simple technique for analyzing your family tree. Now of course the obvious question is, why would anybody want to analyze their family tree? Well, there are a few reasons. As I show you how I go through this process, I'll also explain some of the reasons why I do this, but just kind of up front, let me talk about a few of them. All the time I get messages from people saying, my family tree is all done. I've gone as far as I can go. I've done as much as I can do. Now, I've been doing this for a couple of decades. I have family members who did this for decades before me, and I inherited their work, and we're still not done. And it's really easy to look at your family tree and to think you've done all you can do. So this will help you understand maybe where some of your research holes might be. Another reason why this is important is because a lot of people are taking DNA tests now. Ancestry DNA now has more than 1.5 million people who have taken the test and received their results. That's the database that people are being compared against when they take the test. And one of the challenges that a lot of people have is they don't understand exactly, if I have a cousin match, what that means for our relationship or how I find that common ancestor. And so this simple tree analysis is going to help you in that process as well. Now there are other reasons and we'll uncover those as we go along. So let's go ahead and dive in, and let me just share with you how I do this analysis. And last time I did this was in 2012. I wrote a blog post about it on Ancestry's blog. You can find it. It's called Family History All Done, What's Your Number? And I explain some of the information. But one of the things you're going to want to get your hands on is this little chart that I created in that blog post. Now I'll put a link to this blog post in the description of the YouTube video here so that you can access it pretty quickly. But what I want you to start to understand is how many possible relatives or how many possible ancestors you have. Now we know there's lots more collateral relatives. We know that your parents had brothers and sisters and your grandparents had brothers and sisters and so on and so forth. And we know that they all had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But we're just talking about the pedigree view, or your ancestors, okay? Not just all your relatives, but just your ancestors. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about this relationship column here right down the center. You, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on. Now you can do as many generations as you want. I kind of stick with 8 or 9 or 10 for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that's pretty much where most of my brick walls start to happen, is in around 200 or 300 years ago. Most of my third great-grandparents were born around 1800. And so that means that most of my 6th and 7th great-grandparents were born around 1600. And so you can start to see some of those patterns and some of the records that disappear and some of the brick walls that get thrown up in our way. Okay, so that's the center column here, is what the relationship is. And then over here on the right, we see how many possible people exist in that particular generation. And it's just a really simple math problem. You just double the previous generation. So you are one person, you have 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and so on, until you get up to those 7 times great-grandparents, and there are 512 of them. Now you add all those people together, and your magic number is 1023 if you include yourself, okay? So one of the things that we're looking for is what that 1023 number is for you. And it might surprise you when you finally get around to doing this analysis. So here's what I have done. I have just created a simple spreadsheet. I have come in here and I've listed the generation, and I've listed the relationship and how many are expected to be in that generation, and then how many I have found. And you can just copy the chart that I already made, or you can just very simply create a new chart. And so I just type in the names of that particular relationship. 2 times great-grandparents and 3 times great-grandparents and 4 times great-grandparents And sometimes I misspell when people are actually watching me type, but I think I'm doing okay here. And 6 times great-grandparents, and 7 times great-grandparents. So I've created this chart here with these relationships, and I can, center it, make it all pretty. I'm kind of a stickler for format sometimes. Okay, so there's 1 of me, and there's 2 of them for 8, 16, 32, 64. And if the math gets really hard, one of the fun things about spreadsheets is that you can actually just run really simple formulas that allow you to calculate those very quickly. So there are how many are expected in each generation. And then the next task is to figure out how many of them you know. So I know myself, and I know who both of my parents are, and I know who all 4 of my grandparents are. So we're off to a really good start. Now, not all of you may be in that boat. Some of you may only know one biological parent, or you may not know who one of your grandparents was. And that's fine. The point of this is it's not a, scorecard that we're measuring, each other against each other. It's just a way for us to analyze the data in our family tree so that we can measure our own progress. That's the purpose of this, really. That's the basic purpose. Of course, there are other reasons. Now, here's where things start to get a little tricky, because you may not know off the top of your head how many of these other people you've already identified in your family tree. And so what I've done is I've just gone into my family tree here, and I have made my grandfather put him in the primary position here. I didn't make him the home person. I'm still the home person. I just moved him into the primary position here on this pedigree chart so that I can really quickly look through his ancestors. So here's my grandfather. I know who both of his parents are. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 2 here. And I know who all 4 of his grandparents are, so I'm going to put a 4 there. And it looks like I know who all 8 of these people are, so I'm going to put an 8 there. And here it looks like I'm missing some people. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. Okay, it looks like I have a name of a father here without a mother, so my number is an odd number instead of an even number. So I do know 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11 of these people. Now, I've still got 3 more generations here, so there are a couple of ways that I could do this. I could just move it back and make one of these individuals the primary person, and if you do that, just make sure you keep track of where you are. Or I can just quickly expand each of these generations to get the rest of those numbers. Now, anytime I do not know the name of a person, I don't count them. So in this case, I am fairly certain that the father of George Cowan was a Cowan. I could be wrong, but that is the evidence that I have right now. The reason I even have a father listed with no first name is because I know who one of George's brothers is, and I wanted to be able to keep the brothers connected, and the only way to do that was to add a father. So I added a father with no first name so that I could connect the 2 brothers. So I'm not going to count this individual because I don't know anything about him other than there are 2 brothers who had a father, and those 2 brothers were surnamed Cowan. Okay, so here, you also have to make a decision about whether you're going to count women who only have a first name. So I have a Mary here. I have no idea what her maiden name is, and so I've got a blank there. But you have to decide if you know enough about her that you want to count her, or if you only want to count people where you know their full name, or if you only want to count people where you know everything about them. So here I happen to know that Thomas's father was named William, and I'm fairly certain that William was born in Ireland. I even know probably where he was born, but I don't have any dates for him because I haven't done any research into him. My research all is focused right now on Thomas and Mary, their immigration to the United States, and their children, and so I haven't gone back into this generation. So I put in the name of the father because it showed up in a couple of places in my research, but I haven't researched him. So again, you have to decide what you consider known information. Are you going to count women without a maiden name? Are you going to count people where all you have is a name? That is a decision that you're going to have to make for yourself. So here I have 2 people in this generation and 1 person in the generation beyond that. So I'm going to put a 2 here and a 1 here. And then I'm going to go to the next person on the list. And I've got 2 here and 4 here. Now this is where things start to get a little tricky, because now you're going to have to do math. And I am math challenged sometimes. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking the information that was previously in this column and I'm adding it to the new information. So I have 2 more people to add to this generation. That'll make it 4. And I have 4 more people to add to this generation, and that'll make it 5. Okay, do you see what I did there? And then I'll just move on to the next generation. So here I have 2 and 3 and 2. So add 2 and 3 and 2. And now we're starting to see that that 10th generation is getting filled up. That's kind of exciting. And then we're going to do the same thing here, 2 and 4 and 6. So 2 more here, and 4 more here, and 6 more here. And then we're going to go to the next generation, and we've got 2 and 4, and I'm not going to, well, we'll count him just for today's purposes, for easy math, 2 and 4 and 3. So I'm going to add 2 and 4 and 3, and you see that's just how you just go through it like that. You just work your way, and I don't want to take too much time on screen doing that, but the idea is to work your way generation at a time, just counting how many people are in each generation. And once I finish with my grandfather, then I'm going to switch to my grandmother. I'll hop over here and I'll look at her chart and then I'll go back to the appropriate generation, in this case my great-grandparents, and I'll just add 2 more there, and I'll add 4 more here, and I'll add 8 more here, and I'll add 16 more here, okay? So that's the process. You just go through 1 generation at a time, counting those people and adding them up. And when you finish that, you should end up with a chart that looks a little something like, scroll down here on this blog post, a little something like this. So here are, here's the generation, here's the relationship, here's the number of possible people in that generation, and then here are the people that you have identified in that generation. Now, I want you to just take a close look here at my chart. What you'll notice is I know all of my great-great-grandparents. I know who all 16 of them are. But when we get to that 3rd great-grandparent level, I lose 2 people. There are 32 possible people in that generation, and I only know 30 of them. That's because I have a John O'Brien in generation 5. And I don't know who his parents are, and it's a big brick wall in my family tree. And so I lose that really quickly, and then that number exponentially starts to affect the later generations. And then as I go into the later generations, I end up with brick walls. And so you can see here, back to about 1800, I'm good. But right around actually John was born in 1830 something. That's part of the problem, is he was never consistent about his birth year. So we can't figure out who his parents are. And they were probably born around 1800. And that's where I lose my first 2 people in this analysis. And then it just starts to just plummet from there. Now, the purpose of this analysis is not to discourage you. The purpose of this analysis is to help you see where your research holes are. And so once you get these numbers entered into this chart, there are a couple of additional analyses that you can do. So I've added some additional columns here. One of those has to do with DNA. So if you've taken an Ancestry DNA test and you've got that list of cousin matches, one of the challenges is figuring out who those common ancestors might be with that individual. So a really quick and easy way to create a chart that will help you with that is just to add a column here in this spreadsheet that you've created. So, parents are common ancestors to siblings, okay? And on Ancestry, those are typically going to be labeled as immediate family under the DNA testing. Now, grandparents are common ancestors to first cousins, and great-grandparents are common ancestors to second cousins, and great-greats are common to third, and so on. And so you just add this little column to your chart so that you can print it out and keep it handy, so that as you are looking at your DNA matches and you see someone who is labeled a fourth to sixth cousin, you know that that means that you're looking at somebody in this third to fifth great-grandparent range. You also now know at a glance exactly how many of those people you have or have not identified. So if someone is a fourth cousin to you, and in my case, remember I only know 30 of those people, if someone is a fourth cousin to you and you only know 30 out of the 32 great-grandparents, check and see how many of their great-great-great-grandparents they know, right? So you can do a similar analysis on someone else's tree. And what you can start to look for is, if this person is really a fourth cousin to me, and I don't see any common surnames, and I'm not exactly sure how we're related, it could be because I'm missing these two people. So go back a generation, right, back to these 16 individuals, find that person, John O'Brien in my case, and figure out what I know about him. Well, I know he was born in the late 1830s or the early 1840s in either Ohio, Iowa, or Ireland, depending on which record of his you believe. Okay, well, does this person have anybody that was living in Ohio or Iowa in the early 1840s? Could that person be a sibling of my John O'Brien? Could they be a first cousin to my John O'Brien? Start to look at the holes in your tree as the space where those connections might be made. And that's a great way to start to break through some of those brick walls using your DNA testing. Another thing that you can do just to start to look for your research holes, to start to look for some patterns in your family tree, is you can list birth years and birth places of those individuals. Now, when you get all the way up to this, 512 people, that's going to be a really, really big range. But to make things simple, you can just come here and you can say, well, my grandparents were born between, all four of them were born between 1920 and 1922. And my great-grandparents, if you hop over here into your tree, 1897, 1901, I can come back over here to my grandfather's tree, 1887, 1892. So we've got a range of about 1887 to 1901 for when my great-grandparents were born. And then you just do the same thing for each subsequent generation. What you're doing is you're creating a range of years for when that particular generation in your tree was born. It's a way to look for patterns. It's a way to start to analyze some of those DNA results and compare them. Okay. The other thing you can do then is you can add birthplaces. So my grandparents were born in Idaho, California, and Arkansas. Two of them were born in Arkansas. Now, if I need to make this smaller, I can do that so that this all fits. Come in here and just shrink it down, make the column bigger, however you need to do that. These grandparents were all born in Ohio and in Arkansas and in Utah. And there you go. Okay, and so then again, you go through each subsequent generation and just make a list of birth states or birth countries, or if you're talking about some larger countries like Germany, or what is now Germany. It probably wasn't Germany at the time. For most of these people, you can list a region if that's helpful. And again, what you're looking for are patterns, or at least you're making a notation so that as you start to do research, as you start to compare your family tree, you know where to make some of those connections. So this is a really just a simple, easy way to analyze your family tree. It does take a little bit of work. One of the keys is to make sure that you do not get distracted. Genealogists are notorious for having bright, shiny object syndrome, and it's really easy when you're going through your family tree and you find a hole as you're counting these up to think, oh, I need to go research that family, and off you go, and you lose track of where you are, and you're going to lose count of how you added this information up and where you were at. So do the analysis first, stick to it, get all the way through your whole tree, and then you can go back and say, you know what, I'm missing people at this generation that I really want to find, or I'm missing people at this generation that I really want to find. And you have some direction then for your research, which is also kind of a great thing. So let me just do a quick recap here. One of the purposes for this is so that you can know where to focus, so that you can see very clearly where some of your gaps and some of your holes are, where some of those research holes might be. As you start to, if you add some of those birth year ranges and birthplaces, you're going to start to see patterns of places where your research has gotten stuck. So for me, I have really great research in specific areas. I can go far back in England. I can go, far back in some places in Germany. But when I start getting into some of the French records, or I start getting into some of the Irish records, I have some pretty big brick walls there. Well, those brick walls could just be because of my lack of understanding. So maybe if I see a bunch of people drop off once they get to Ireland, maybe what I need to do next in my genealogy education is spend some time learning about how to do Irish research, what Irish records are available for that specific time period. So it's a really great way to look for patterns. And then, of course, just having a handy chart printed out and set next to you as you work through some of those Ancestry DNA matches is going to help you figure out the possible relationships a lot quicker, or understand where in your family tree those people might fit if you have holes in your tree or if they have holes in their tree. Because doing an analysis on someone else's tree, right, is also totally possible once you've mastered this for it yourself. Well, that's all I have prepared for you today. It was short and sweet, but I hope that this is something useful for you, just this little analysis technique, that it will give you some time to spend looking into your tree instead of actually researching in your tree, so that you can kind of take a step back and get a bigger picture and understand where to go from here in your research. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.